Hey there folks, welcome back to another Civilization 6 video, and this video is for you folks that load up your game and you're like, oh, this blows, my starting location sucks ass, and the nearest AI is being a super aggressive asshole with all their extra units on Deity, and we're going to show you how to deal with that. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on here. So the first thing you should notice here is it is apparent that this starting location sucks ass. So you should be able to immediately tell this by the number of hexes here that just have two total resources on them, the one food and one production tiles. So it looks like we're going to have to move at least probably 2 turns to get to even a reasonable tile here to have our capital city. There are some mountains, so southeast seems to be the most reasonable starting spot, but even that's not a good starting spot. If you look at what's visible around there, none of the adjacent tiles to that one hills plains tile that will give us at least 4 on the city tile are really very good either. We're off to a dynamite start here. We are spending 2 turns to move to not a good location, just to a probably quite a bit below average location in my opinion. So if this happens to you, you should probably start by researching animal husbandry, just in the hopes that you're going to get a horse tile within your borders to actually get some workable land. I'm lucky enough to have gotten a first meet on a city-state, so we're going to get that additional science output, which is pretty big early game. And if you get a crap starting spot like this, and you meet either an industrial city-state or a militaristic city-state first, you may have to lean on those bonuses more than you normally would. So that would be for industrial city-states, probably buildings, probably not wonders since your production is going to suck. And then for a militaristic city-state, that would be units. So you'll want to probably prioritize that to take advantage of those bonuses, because your innate production is going to suck, and your innate food production is going to suck as well. So you're not going to get more citizens, and you're not going to be able to expand into working other tiles, and those other tiles also suck anyway and aren't going to give you that much production. We just discovered the volcano wonder down there. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it, but that would give us a good settling opportunity to get lucky with some eruptions around that. And it's got a lot of good tiles there. The problem is that France is closer to that and obviously can settle it quicker on Deity with their bonus settlers, and we have terrible production to begin with. So what we're probably going to have to do is, if we want to select that area to be one of the areas that our empire is in, is that we're probably going to have to settle farther away than we normally would like to once we build our first settler. Because normally you wouldn't want to build that far away from your capital as your first expansion city. And there are some other options nearby, mainly to the southeast, where there's like those horses and the stone. But if I want to sort of gamble and go for the natural wonder tile adjacent yields, then I would have to settle quite a bit farther away. And with a shitty start, sometimes you do have to gamble. So if you have a shit start, my recommendation is that you should favor probably selecting Amani as your first governor, with the caveat that you'd either have to at least have met one city-state first or be able to complete a quest for a city-state so that you get suzerainty status. And the reason for this is because if you have a crappy starting spot, you're probably going to have a shitty era score due to your lack of ability to progress through the civic and tech tree quickly, or produce units to clear barbarian camps, or any number of other things that would contribute to your era score. And thus your population is going to be lower, and you're going to be much more pressured in trying to expand your cities if you have any nearby AI, because your population is going to suck. And if you're in a dark age, you're then going to have to be concentrating on not losing your city to that loyalty pressure. Now, we can already see that this is potentially going to be a problem for us, because France is settling towards us, and we're going to have the low population problem. So we really do want to avoid that dark age. Now, the second problem that I just mentioned is that we met Wilhelmina to the north, and a lot of times if they have a nearby bordering city-state, they are going to attack the city-state. So if Wilhelmina is able to attack and take out Mytia, that is actually then going to ruin my suzerainty bonus there, and I'm going to lose that extra science. So we want to sort of interfere with that too, but at the same time, we can't leave ourselves vulnerable to France. So we're really in sort of a shit spot here. We have a third shitty development unfolding, and in that is that we missed a scout and it managed to get back to the barbarian camp. So that means there is a bunch of barbarians spawning, and that camp is right in the way of where we want to head to place our settlers. So that sort of sucks because we have one warrior which is pretty injured, and then just slinger, and there's like at least 4 or 5 barbarian units coming our way. So that is a problem. Even though we don't have Magnus, we went ahead and sped up our production by taking chops. And really, in the long run, that's going to be a better play because we need to get our settler out there. So chopping out that archer is going to help us to get that settler down there quicker. So even if you don't have Magnus, you should be chopping if you need to here. And at this point, given the way that France is advancing and the barbarian activity down there, probably just going to be spamming out archers. That is probably the best play here. So even though we don't have very good production, there's really no way we're going to catch up just building infrastructure at this point. So we're going to have to look to be semi-aggressive. If you have Heroes and Legends mode active, you're going to have to look for options to aggressively use heroes. Now, I don't recommend building them in the Ancient Era because their attack power scales with the era that you are in. The only hero that I recommend taking in the Ancient Era is probably Himiko. Otherwise, unless it's absolutely an emergency and you need to churn out that first hero that you can usually get out in 1 or 2 turns, you should wait until right when the classical era hits to produce that hero. You'll get a lot more value out of it. In a lot of games, I would wait until at a minimum I had the plus 50% to settlers policy card, or quite frequently actually until I was able to chop out the government plaza and the ancestral hall before building a second settler. Now, in this case, I went ahead and went into building another settler immediately, and a lot of that has to do with how aggressively France is building out. You see, they are building. They've got 3 very clustered cities advancing in on my border, and then one of them is sort of near the area that I want to settle with that wonder. So I really need to look for some options to get some population to defend my loyalty, as we discussed earlier. The other consideration in making this choice is how many of the tiles within your empire's border or that you can reasonably purchase are tiles that you would actually want to work for high value output. So if the answer is only 2 and you are at 3 population, then really like building another settler at that point, even when it's slower, is probably a good option, simply because like why do you need to raise your population up just to work shitty tiles? Like you're better off just building out that settler even without the policy bonus or the government plaza bonus. The Netherlands has, in the meantime, declared war on the city-state that I am suzerain of. Now, luckily, Mitia is in a pretty good position there, so we can bring units up there to block without actually declaring war on the Netherlands, which would be very risky, obviously, with the way that France is pressing up against our borders. So now I make a mistake here in bringing the archer up there because since we're not really there to fight, we're just there to block the adjacent tiles to the city. Then the slinger probably would have been the better block play, as I could bring that up there and just sit that up there, and there'd be no need to spend gold upgrading it. And then I should have left my archer down where it was, probably so that I would have it available in case France attacks. Now, I mentioned earlier that when you are starting from behind, that sometimes it is better to take the higher risk, high reward options. Now, one exception I think is the Pantheon Selection. In this case, I'm actually going to go with the lower max reward option. So, it's like God of the Open Sky with the +1 culture from pastures is not something that I would normally take if I'm having a good start, unless I just have some absurd number of pastures. And that's just because I think that it caps out in terms of overall value quicker than some of the other Pantheon options. But if you have a crappy start and you really need to get moving in terms of like getting to political philosophy because you haven't been able to build monuments in the normal time frame that you would had you had a better production start, then something like God of the Open Sky is going to be able to help catch you up more quickly. So you're going to get that early value out of it, but it's going to have less maximum value overall in the game. There are a few things going our way. Wilhelmina is not having a lot of success taking down Midia, so minor victory for us. It is fortunate that the AI does not seem to utilize Arthur's ability. You can see Wilhelmina has Arthur, but they never seem to create any of the questing knights using him. So they might have had a little more success, but probably not since there's only 3 entry points into Midia. Having just melee units there probably wouldn't have been enough to take the walls down. Now you can see that France is setting up for the not so surprise attack down there on that first city that I settled down there by the volcano wonder. And you might be wondering, like, why are you building a monument if you're about to get attacked? Well, I just don't have enough production really to actually get any unit out in any reasonable amount of time. So it really doesn't matter what I'm building. But should I weather the storm, my preference would be to have a monument built there rather than having another unit. And the reason for that is then that gives me another option to get a hero out from that city. So I don't know the exact number of turns it would have taken to build another military unit there, but it would not be quickly enough to make a difference in the outcome of the battle that's going on there now. Now, a couple of other things going on. So the battle is not going great down there. And you can see that I am slowing down my overall military unit production a little by building the special barracks building for Alexander in my capital city. And that's more of a long-term play, not like long, but I think that like by the time they take that city, I should be able to get the barracks built, and that will be overall beneficial because what I'm expecting is that I'm going to lose that city. Hopefully, they don't raise it, and then I will be able to recapture or counter push there because it's not looking great for holding that city. Even though they don't have like a lot of units, they have it halfway down, and my warrior doesn't have enough health to keep attacking back. So it looks like yeah, I mean it's pretty much lights for my city there. And then you see I flipped from the monument to the galley again. Probably didn't matter. I think I tried to flip policy cards to see if I could quickly get a galley out there, which obviously 11 turns is not very quick. And now you can see again, we discussed earlier that loyalty issue. If you didn't notice, France is in a uh, golden age, and I am in a normal age. So I swear I should just play for freaking the Mapuche because like my nearest neighbor or the civ that I'm at war at like literally always has golden age in the classical era, like just never fails. So so now I'm having to use a suboptimal governor choice because I am needing that defensive governor in case they immediately converge on Dion there. And so I obviously I don't have a big military presence. I'm trying to get that monument finished so that I can get a hero out there. And obviously I'm bringing back down the archer that I had sitting up there. Now, in retrospect, I might have been able to hold that city had I not been farting around with that archer up there, probably where he wasn't needed. So that was probably not a good use of my early military unit, given that that archer represented like 1/3 of my total military count and probably like 60% of my actual overall military strength. So having him stand up around there by that city state, probably not a good decision. But so we have some strong hero choices. We had Hamiko, Beowulf, and the Mayan twins. Now it's a close call between the Mayan twins and Beowulf when you're in a war, but I think Beowulf just is better overall, just in terms of being able to remove archers within the city walls over the Mayan twins, which like they don't have any units at this point that like I'm really gung ho about stealing that are gonna shift the tide of the battle that much. Yeah, it would be nice to get my unit count up because I just don't have that much unit production. But Beowulf is going to conserve my army a lot more from archers within their city walls if I attempt to counter push. Now, these early military skirmishes should be mainly about preserving your units, so positioning your archers in a manner that you can take out as many of their units as possible without sacrificing any units, because they have the pure numbers advantage. This is really the only feasible strategy. Unless there's something that like some huge opportunity that comes up where you're going to want to sacrifice a unit, like where like let's say you can just take the city on that turn. It's probably worth it. They still have quite a few archers. They had at least two surrounding Bordeaux, and then one more down there by La Rochelle. They're utilizing chariots as well, and then have some warriors. So I'm still outnumbered by quite a bit, but as long as I don't lose Beowulf, I should be able to even out the count pretty quickly. And remember, we talked about this. Waiting until the classical era to summon Beowulf is going to have made a huge difference. He's going to have a lot more survivability because of his higher overall combat strength. So that should give me the ability to sort of get in and use his ability on the archers in the cities if I can't draw them out. Now, at this point in the game, there is a brief window where I would consider the player to have an advantage over the AI in a war, and that is like right around when the AI gets catapults. Because for some reason, no matter how badly they are losing, like even if they have no prospect of advancing on your city in some reasonable time frame, they will invest a lot of production into building catapults, which is really strange because they're not that difficult to kill. They have a decent range damage if they have them garrisoned in the city, but obviously an archer is just a much better investment in terms of defense. So during that window, the AI will waste a lot of time investing in catapults, and that time will be the time that you can get caught up, and you have a very short window because a lot of times they're going to be quickly getting into crossbowmen after that point. Sometimes the leg behind and not get them, so you could look out. Now, as you are advancing on the enemy city, you do want to be aware of where their farms are positioned so that you can position strategically to heal units that might need to be healed via pillaging. If you have access to the card that gives plus 50% to pillage, you'll want to take that, and you'll want to look for opportunities to pillage any improvements or districts. And the as far as pillaging districts goes, that also reduces the overall defense score of the city. You might have noticed there that I built the special horseman unit for Alexander, and that was actually a mistake. I did not mean to build that horseman unit in the capital because obviously I built the barracks improvement that is not for cavalry. So I think I just looked at the symbol and I for some reason thought that was the melee unit because there's two different special units for Alexander. So, but anyway, still a good unit, but not the most optimal thing to do to build the special barracks and then build a unit that doesn't correspond to that. Also, you might note that I'm building a trade route in my capital city. Now, normally when you're at war, building trade routes is not the most optimal thing if you're already at war. But because I am pressing an advance right now, the internal trade route should be relatively safe. And because I'm going to be building military units from that capital, I'm going to want to be able to speed up how quickly I can move them up. Now, my barracks and encampment paid off here, and that I got an early great general, so that plus 5 to combat strength and that additional movement is going to be pretty valuable. And now, as you can see, I still didn't take back the city that I originally lost, but I took actually the better city from them, one of their cities, La Rochelle. Unfortunately, you can see that their cities grew very fast, and they have 7 and 6 population on those two nearest ones, with 5 on the also nearby Paris. So holding the loyalty on that city is going to be difficult. So that's going to force us to go very quickly into the offense, try and eliminate that loyalty pressure by taking out Bordereau. You can see that we are closing in on the end of the classical era, so we want to obtain any era score that we can to try and alleviate that loyalty pressure. If we can get an advantage over France, that would be great, or if at least France just doesn't get a golden age in the next era. The other thing to keep in mind, as the era is going to be rolling over, that's going to be a good opportunity time to build another hero out, because you're going to get maximum combat efficiency out of a hero at that point. Now, another consideration to make, and in this example, it probably wouldn't be feasible because of the loyalty pressure, but if you aren't having a loyalty pressure issue, but let's say you do get dragged into an early war, you can always just use it as an opportunity primarily to get resources off of pillaging, and that is going to be much less military intensive. You'll be able to do that. And if you're going to do that, you probably should focus on horsemen probably as your unit. But that's another way you can benefit off of these early wars. In this case, because they took my city and are also pressuring my borders, I'm going with the more aggressive and probably more difficult to pull off tactic of the counter push. Um, and again, it can be really random when crossbowmen or walls sort of come out for the AI. So, you do need a little bit of luck, but if you've, got a good strategy plan and you are planning your hero effectiveness correctly and positioning your units correctly, you should be able to counter push, on a relatively regular basis, even against a deity AI. Now, getting back to that point about crossbowmen and walls, you obviously want to sort of research on that bottom part of that tech tree to get catapults if necessary. Although catapults can be sort of difficult to utilize, the AI does correctly prioritize them as a target, and if they have crossbowmen and walls, they're just gonna you're gonna need a lot of more catapults than you normally would. But we did end up getting the gap in era. Well, I don't think we got a gap. We ended up both getting normal age, and the reason that we were having so much loyalty pressure was because that there was a gap in favor of France. So now La Rochelle actually was on the brink of flipping to a free city, but we managed to save it with the era rollover. So that is good. The other thing, noting that diplomatic vote, unless you have a lot of diplomatic points, you are typically not going to be able to get the -5 vote. So you're probably going to want to do the +5 vote to whatever is going to benefit you most. Unless the AI has crossbowmen once again, then you want to avoid getting the ranged bonus, pretty much like the plague. Now in this game, I didn't manage to get a religion, but if you do have one, or even just for fun, if you do see their religious units wandering around, don't forget, if it's convenient, to go over there and condemn heretic and destroy their religious unit, because I mean they did invest resources into getting that religious unit. So anything that you can do that hinders them, is beneficial. And plus, without looking too much into what religion they have. They don't usually take like crusade or anything, but I mean there is an off chance that converting your cities is going to benefit them by whatever beliefs they happen to have selected. Now, in this instance, I am able to press my military advantage, and I don't see a whole lot of counter threat by France. But you do want to keep an eye on the situation, on what units they have, what heroes they have, what techs they have, in terms of when you try and get peace. Because if it looks like you're going to stall out, then it's best to try and get peace. But again, you're going to want to make sure you can secure um, any that you want to make sure that you can avoid any loyalty problems by either having a settler ready to forward settle and give yourself some more loyalty support, or just having taken enough of their cities to avoid that. Now you can see they still have a 9 and 8 population city, so they are getting quite a bit of loyalty pressure pushback. Their capital is farther away, so the capital does emanate double loyalty pressure. So you have to be careful when taking any cities that are directly adjacent to their capital. But you always want to monitor when the best time to exit the war is. You want an exit strategy. I'm pretty bad at that. I tend to just keep trying to push until like the last possible moment where I know that I'm not going to get any more benefit out of it. One other thing too is if you can split off the lower population cities, you can sort of ignore those and expect them to flip via free city status. So that is one thing you can do to avoid getting additional grievances. Obviously, if it flips as a free city, you are not going to get grievances for that. So if possible, I would avoid cities that have low population and focus your efforts on the highest population cities. You can also see that the city that we are attacking has a lot of marsh terrain on it. You have to be careful if you're positioning units around to take a city and there is a lot of terrain that looks like marshy like that, or floodplains and such, because you are going to get negative defense on those squares. So you want to avoid positioning yourselves on those squares if possible, and you want to prefer hills, forests, and such. Even though they take more movement to move into, once you're positioned on those tiles, they are going to be a much stronger position overall. So anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully this was some good tips for you, and that you will not give up in the future if you get a terrible starting spot, or if the AI is just really being a jackass. Again, this Deity is a Deity level playthrough, Heroes and Legends, Secret Societies, and Monopolies and Corporations mode on. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.